It's always a pleasure and a relief to be introduced by somebody else, because when I have to do it myself, I kind of don't know what to say about myself. I say, I'm Rajiv, and if I'm meeting a stranger, I have to fill in the next blank. This is what I do. So one of the things I do, I might call myself as a potter. I apprentice with a potter in Connecticut every summer, Guy Wolf, who makes flower pots for Martha Stewart. And when I'm in his circle of friends, I'm a potter. I run a business out of New York called Letters in Ink, where I do calligraphy in pen and ink, and I also do chalkboards for restaurants and cafes and different companies. Sometimes I call myself a painter. Many people know me as Kevin G, the rapping mathlete from Mean Girls. So, which is something that I have grown to really embrace. No one thought this movie was going anywhere. I was sitting in the hair and makeup chair one day while we were shooting, and we actually shot completely in Toronto, and many of our scenes were right down here at U of T. This is Con Hall, where we had our math competition. But I remember sitting in the hair and makeup chair one day and asking the makeup artist how she thought this movie was going to do. And she's like, please, it's called Mean Girls, and it's starring Lindsay Lohan. It's going, it's like, it's going straight to DVD. And I remember thinking, oh, that sucks. Oh well. But for me, it was a thrill. Because up until this point, all of the arts and crafts that I had grown up doing as a kid were things that were tangible. They were things that I could do with my hands. And when I became more proficient at them, and sometimes had an audience around me to witness what I was doing, there was always the appreciation from the audience when they observed my technique. So if I was lifting up the wall of a clay pot, you could hear the people around me kind of sigh in marveling at the technique. What fascinated me about this art form was that if I was doing my work properly, you laughed or you cried, you went along the journey that I was going on. And that fascinated me because you couldn't see what that work was. It was intangible. And as a young first-year student at U of T, wanting to be an actor was just sort of something that seemed a little outlandish. And landing this part in a major Hollywood movie was the reassurance that maybe this could work. Maybe I could really become an actor. It just didn't really seem very plausible at the time because the only parts that I could really try out for as a skinny young brown guy were for terrorists. And I have to say, when I tried out for the terrorists, I was always terrorist number 2 because I was like too young. So I was never even the guy that got to push the button to blow up the whatever. So terrorists, math nerds, this was a very unconventional math nerd, so I was like really shocked by this. Or like guys working in a call center in India being like, you know, how is the weather in Pawcatuck, Rhode Island? And I just remember being on set and thinking, you know, I just wish that one day I could possibly play a lead role in a major Hollywood movie, and maybe that movie could be nominated for an Oscar, and I could take my mom, and we'd walk along the red carpet, and I might be nominated for the lead role, and you know, dreaming as a young actor does. But then coming back to reality and thinking, well, you know, terrorists, math geeks, call center workers, it's probably not gonna happen. This line was one that resonated with me. Tina Fey wrote the script. She wrote a great script. I felt like she had a very accurate pulse of what high school was like in North America. And this line in particular was something that I think I had grown up doing. You know, I had weird childhood hobbies of keeping chickens in my backyard and, you know, digging clay up from the backyard to make my pottery. And this line is kind of what led me to taking a chance and trying to make this acting thing work. On the set of Mean Girls, my dream of maybe making this work was to take a turn, a very drastic turn. I was in my first year here at U of T. I was trying to juggle biology 101 with shooting. I ended up failing biology and almost failing drama class, ironically, because I missed so many classes to make a movie. But on the set of Mean Girls, one day the cameraman came up to me and he's like, I just finished this book, and you really remind me of this lead character. And I'm like, oh yeah? Interesting. Was he brown? And he's like, yeah, he was actually. Have you read Life of Pi? No, I haven't read Life of Pi, I said, but I've seen the cover on the subway, and I thought, well, let's see what this book is about. So I went out that day. I left. We were shooting downtown, right around here, and I walked over to the Indigo at Bay and Bloor and bought a copy of Life of Pi, and then I spent the next 2 days on set reading it. And as I dove deeper and deeper into this book, it was almost creepy how similar I was to this character. Pi is Tamil. My parents are Tamil. He grew up in Pondicherry in South India, in a zoo. I grew up at Meadowvale and Shepherd, right beside the Toronto Zoo. So if I left my bedroom window open at night, I heard elephants through my window. Pi is fascinated with religion as a kid. I grew up in a Hindu household where my parents only on big holidays would take us to the temple in Richmond Hill. And I really loved going as a toddler. I loved the spectacle and the ritual. But I also had an Irish aunt, Bridget, who would take me to Mass with her. And I, in a weird, strange way, enjoyed that too, the spectacle of Catholic Mass. I finished this book and I was just like, this is weird. This book feels like it was written about, the kid actually ends up going to U of T, where I was at the time, and is enrolled at St. Mike's. So I finished the book, what the fuck, this is so creepy. Was someone spying on me? And I remember the cameraman turning the corner and saying, what do you think? And that coinciding with me just finishing the book and kind of sighing and thinking, I don't know what to think. This is so strange. A week later, I find out they're making this book into a movie, and I lost my shit. Because here, finally, was that dream that I thought would never actually come true. The possibility of that dream, which was even better. The possibility of playing this lead role that no one else could play, that only I was suited for. Of that movie potentially being nominated for an Oscar or a few, walking down that red carpet. And I remember hearing that they were going to shoot this movie within 6 months of Mean Girls coming out and thinking, you know what? I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get that part. That part is my part, and no one else can play it. I was at U of T. I realized that what I really needed to do was immerse myself in the life of this character. I was born in Canada, and although I grew up hearing about my parents' childhood in Sri Lanka, I didn't really know that world. I felt like I could connect to this character on many levels, but in order to authentically be him fully, I needed to become an Indian schoolboy. So, why are you laughing? That's not funny. So I dropped out of U of T. I gave my notice at the registrar's office that I wasn't coming back next year, and I booked a one-way ticket to India. Pi attends a school in Pondicherry called Petit Seminaire, and although Pi is fictional, Petit Seminaire is a very real place. It was a school that was started in the 1820s. I found the school. I convinced the principal to let me sit at the back of a classroom for a little while, and I just started observing these kids. I wanted to know that when I walked into that audition room, I wasn't doing my terrorist accent like this. I wanted to make sure that I was doing an authentic Pondicherry accent. You know, when I was doing my Indian accent going into these auditions, it was just an Indian accent. And I started to realize that there was a difference. You don't just have an Indian accent. In the north, where the language is Hindi, when they speak English, the vowels are a lot more open. And as we go further to the south, the vowels are very, very short because they speak Tamil in the south. And so the vowels in Tamil are very short. There's a difference between those two accents. I wanted to make that real, and these kids started helping me do that. I wanted to know that when I slumped in my chair in that audition, I was slumping in the right way. And that's why I was there. I befriended the 5 guys that sat in front of me, and these guys really taught me what I needed to know. They became my authentic Pondicherry friends. They called themselves the Dudes of Petite. And being with them kind of legitimized that I could become one of them. It was success. I returned to Toronto only to discover that the movie was put on hold. They lost their director, and it was a huge blow. This was something that was to continue for the next 5 years, finding a director, getting put on hold. I decided I'd re-enroll at U of T and just wait it out, and that's what happened. Came back to U of T, decided I'd continue to just do my research and wait for this part to come up. The next big thing that I needed to do was learn how to swim. I had a huge fear of the water, didn't know anything about swimming, spent every day of the next 4 years here at U of T in the pool at the athletic center, and eventually learned how to swim. The last bit of research that I needed to do about 3 years in was to become a castaway. I found this book written by a man that survived drifting across the ocean for 76 days when his boat went down in the middle of the Atlantic, Stephen Callahan. I read his book, but his book still seemed like fiction to me. So I did what I do best. I stalked him. I found him in Maine, and I became his friend. This was dinner with Stephen and his wife, Kathy. And that story became real to me. And I felt like now I had in my bag of tricks everything I needed to do to go into that audition and deliver those lines as a real, authentic character. Ang Lee was the last and final director to be attached to the project after 5 years of, back and forth, and it looked like it was going to happen. I met his casting director in New York, pulled out all of this research that I had done, and she looked me in the eye and said, you will definitely be seeing me again, and I love you, which was kind of my reassurance. Then I find out that Ang Lee cast some unknown Indian schoolboy in the part, and like that, the 6 long years of waiting and hoping and dreaming was over. That coincided with me graduating from school, and I was kind of traumatized. This person was a very real part of me, and in an instant, he was gone. I didn't know how to deal with that. So I ended up actually running away and becoming a nanny in Munich, an au pair. It just felt like the right thing to do, to kind of leave this whole world that I knew and escape to somewhere where I didn't know anything. And it was the perfect medicine for me to mourn the loss of what had happened. These were the 2 kids that I took care of, Alexander and Sebastian. And by the end of the year, I had realized that, if I was daunted by the reality of getting this part, I probably wouldn't have tried. But I did tell myself at the very beginning, like Kevin G said, don't let those haters stop you from doing a thing. You gotta try, and you gotta know that you might not get this part, but that shouldn't stop you from even trying. And at the end of the year, I think I had come back to life, realizing that it was so much better to have at least embarked on that journey than to have played it safe. Ironically, I started giving this talk, a much longer version of this talk, at colleges all over the States, and that culminated and ended up being something, get back to this, that turned into a book called The Elephants in My Backyard, and it's the detailed version of this story. The point I think I realized at the very end of this whole process was that it's not easy. Taking chances and making mistakes and falling flat on your face and picking yourself up again is really tough. And as Britney Spears says, you gotta work, bitch. You want a hot body, you want a Maserati, you want to achieve anything in life, you have to work. But there is no assurance that you're going to succeed. And everyone at some point in their life is going to experience major failure. Every one of you students here is going to experience that big, scary open door when you leave school. And going out there in the real world and facing the possibility of succeeding and failure is something that I have really learned to embrace. And I would like to be able to tie a little bow on this and end the talk here and say, I wrote a book, and in the end, I succeeded. But there's reviews. So even I'm learning after this that although some reviews have praised this book and called it inspirational and motivational, others have torn it apart and called it mean and nasty and racist, and they just didn't get my jokes. But I hope that my short little talk about my experience, inspires all of you to take chances, to not be afraid of falling flat on your face, and to not let those haters stop you from doing your thing. Thank you. Oh, you sucker MCs ain't got nothing on me. From my grades to my life, you can't touch Kevin G. I'm a mathlete. So nerd is inferred, but forget what you heard. I'm like James, I'm on the third. Just you're shaking, not stirring, Kevin a poor. The G is silent when I sneak in your door and make love to your woman on the bathroom floor. I don't play like Shaggy. You know it was me, because the next time you see her, she'd be like, oh, Kevin G. Okay.